Okay. All right. Welcome everybody to the 2023 TSP update meeting. This is something we've done for the last couple of years to get information out to all the TSPs and to the service foresters that assist with NRCS programs in Pennsylvania. My name is Peter Hoagland, and I am the state forester for NRCS Pennsylvania. Again, this meeting is being recorded so that we can send this out to folks who weren't able to attend today. We will also be sending out the slides to everybody following the presentation as soon as we can get it posted. Here is the agenda for today's meeting. We're going to go through some updates to the forest management plan, some practices updates on the TSP registry profile, and hopefully that leaves time for questions and answers. If you do have questions, please go ahead and enter those into the chat as we go along, and I will do my best to answer them at the end. If there are questions that need follow-up, we could do some follow-up and do some research and get back to you. So for 2023, there is a new look to our national website that displays the CPAs, the DIAs, and the CMAs. That stands for Conservation Practice Activities, Design and Implementation Activities, and Conservation Evaluation and Monitoring Activities. These are activities, at least the CPAs and the DIAs, activities that TSPs write for NRCS contracts. Excuse me, this is the website, and this is where the documents are located for the national CPAs and DIAs. In particular, we're talking about the CPA 106 and the DIA 165. I should note that the links to all these websites that I'm going to display today and the documents are going to be included within the presentation like they were last year when I send it out to folks. So you can just click on that within the presentation. This is what the beginning of the activity document looks like for the CPA Conservation Planning Activity 106. In general, they follow a similar format to the conservation practice standards with the inclusion of definitions, criteria, deliverables, and references. I am going to be going over the specific criteria and deliverables for the CPA 106 and the DIA 165 within this presentation. And this is what the DIA, Design and Implementation Activity document, looks like for the Forest Management Practice Design, the DIA 165. Before I get into the individual criteria of these documents, I do want to touch briefly on how these activities are going to be contracted through financial assistance through NRCS. Oops. Okay, so to contract the CPA 106 and the DIA 165, Pennsylvania NRCS will be pairing the activities together in one contract. Please mute. It is acceptable for the resulting contract and preferable for the resulting contract to be one forest management plan document that covers the criteria and the deliverables of both the 106 and the 165. We are not allowed to group the CPA, the DIA, and conservation practices together in one single contract. So to show a visual of that, we're going to contract the CPA 106 and the DIA 165 together in one contract, resulting in one forest management plan. And then in a separate contract, we will be contracting the conservation practices, such as forest stand improvement, tree shrub establishment. What is something new for 2023 is the CEMA 223, the Conservation Evaluation and Monitoring Activity 223. This is for forest management and assessment. We will not be contracting the CEMA 223 with the DIA 165 and CPA 106. This is specifically for clients with existing forest management plans that need forest inventory and assessment, or a management plan. And what's interesting about these CMAs is that they are not necessarily written by technical service providers. There is no registry for technical service providers to write CMAs. You have to be a qualified individual. So that's a person that has qualifications listed here as a certified forester, certified consulting forester, or state licensed forestry professional, of which we don't have in Pennsylvania. Non-affiliated consultant with a bachelor's degree in forestry or natural resources, or a person with a minimum of 2 years experience in forest inventory. So for example, if a landowner has a family forest carbon program plan that doesn't have inventory meeting NRCS inventory requirements, we might be contracting a CMA 223 for that person. They do not have to use a TSP, a technical service provider qualified for 106 or 165 to get those written. This is the first year for this. There might be some growing pains for this, and I do not expect us to do a lot of these CMA 223 contracts, but that remains to be seen for 2023. And quickly, this is what the CMA 223 Forest Management Assessment document looks like, and that is available on the same website that I showed earlier, the national website. And again, the main emphasis for the CMA 223 is forest inventory for a plan that already exists and is lacking adequate inventory. So if there is a landowner seeking to get a new implementation contract implementing conservation practices for 2023, FMP Forest Management Plan is still required. That FMP can still be a CAP 106 plan if it was written prior to 2021 when we transitioned to the CPA 106 and DIA 165 plans. It can also now be a CPA 106 and DIA 165 plan, 2022 or newer. It can also be a forest stewardship plan that meets current national guidelines. It can also be another plan meeting NRCS Forest Management Plan criteria, like with the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay and their Forest Stewardship Network program, as long as it's meeting NRCS FMP criteria. So with the CAP 106 plans, that will hold true for the next 8 years, I believe, because CAP 106 plans have a 10-year lifespan, and as we transition to the CPA plans from the CAP 106 plans, that began in fiscal year 2022. All right, quickly on the state EQIP payment schedule for 2023. This is the website now where all the states have payment schedules loaded. This will again be linked in your presentation when I send it out. I've done a quick snapshot from the Pennsylvania EQIP payment schedule, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which is the program that funds forest management plan development, to show the unit costs for the Forest Management Plan CPA 106 and the DIA 165, the practice design. Again, unit rates are based on acreage of the property. So for example, if you have a landowner with a 25-acre forest that gets an FMP contract from NRCS, that landowner will have a contract with a line item for forest management plan with an incentive payment for $1,764 and a separate line item for a forest management practice design with an incentive payment for $504, totaling $2,268 for an FMP incentive payment on a 25-acre FMP. For ease of reading on this screen, I did not include the historically underserved rates, but just know that on the official payment schedule, the historically underserved participants are eligible for higher incentive payment rates. So if you do have any questions on historically underserved, I encourage you to check out the NRCS EQIP website that goes into greater detail than I can give here on historically underserved eligibility and qualifications. So here's something new for fiscal year 2023 for Pennsylvania. We have put out a new forest management checklist that aligns with the national criteria to reduce, well, hopefully reduce some confusion and also improve some consistency. We have also put out a FMP template. These are both sitting in the section 3 of the Pennsylvania Field Office Technical Guide under a folder called Guidance Documents and a subfolder called Forest Management Planning, shown on your screen here. Use of the template is entirely optional, but it does include the state-specific signature pages and all the items that are in the checklist and in the national criteria. It is the minimum amount of items that are required for the forest management plan. We have gone through the template and included some guidance on populating items throughout the template and placeholders for required items. Please note that this template has been released to the Field Office Technical Guide, but we may make some periodic updates to it as we receive feedback from additional reviewers and technical service providers like yourselves. The template is in a Word document format for ease of editing, and as you go through it, and I'm going to show some screenshots of it later on in the presentation here, but as you go through it, the guidance for completing the template is in italics throughout the document, so you can read through and hopefully utilize that as much as you want. I know that's something that folks were asking for last year, and we have, at least in Pennsylvania, gotten our act together and put something out so that hopefully that is a little bit more helpful for TSPs and also for service foresters and NRCS foresters that are reviewing plans. All right, so this is what the beginning of the forest management plan checklist looks like. This is a 9-page document that includes all the criteria for the forest management plan. And please note on this front page, we are saying that the forest management plan must be reviewed by a qualified NRCS forester and or a Pennsylvania Department of Conservation Natural Resources, a DCNR service forester, using this FMP checklist that's in the section 3 of the Field Office Technical Guide. If a landowner is selecting the box to enroll in the Forest Stewardship Program, then the service forester review is required. All right, looking at the template briefly, this is what the beginning of the template looks like. Again, this includes all the required items from the checklist, and this is from the client and site information section of the checklist. Again, this is entirely optional. You do not have to use this checklist, but we're making it available as a resource for technical service providers. And we put out this consistent Pennsylvania template format. This does also include the TSP certification statements that are in the checklist and the landowner acceptance signatures, and there's sections for NRCS administrative review, everything that is required to be included in the signature pages, as well as the optional Forest Stewardship Program participation and the landowner pledge applicable to the Forest Stewardship Program. The language in this section for the Forest Stewardship Program, has been updated slightly from the previous templates that were out there based on consultation with the new Forest Stewardship Program Coordinator and also with DCNR. This is also where the service forester documents their review in the forest management plan. Within the forest management plan, this is not a new requirement, but NRCS requires that notes and correspondence be included in the forest management plan. While this is not required to be done on this particular form, called the Conservation Assistance Notes, you can use this form or capture the required elements in your own format. So this form is linked within the checklist and also within the FMP template. So the notes do have to document a summary of a pre-work meeting, and that has to be between the participating individuals, such as the participant, the landowner, the TSP, NRCS, and the service forester, in order to establish collaboration and to address any questions amongst the parties. You have to document each of the interactions with the participant and the results of those interactions, and you do need to document their objectives. That has to be specific, measurable, attainable, and relevant. And then you're documenting the site visits and individuals there. This is simply a record of what occurred, what interactions occurred, and who was there. For the maps that need to be included in the plan, these are the minimum mapping requirements. This information really has not changed ever for the forest management plans. These are the required maps that should be included in the forest management plan. Number one, a general location map showing the access roads, showing access to the location. Number two, a forest management plan base map. And this could consist of several maps to show the individual stands. Could also include maps to show different topographic features, and then number three, the soils map, which is generally copied straight out of web soil survey, and an existing wetland map, if there are wetlands shown on the soil survey or topo map for the site. But also if there are wetlands encountered on the site that might not show up in web soil survey, like vernal pools, we want to make sure we're capturing that information too. For each stand, there must be a stand level resource inventory and assessment. This does include multiple measurements, and there are details on the screen and reflected in the template and in the checklist. This includes items like basal area, trees per acre, diameter distribution by 2-inch size classes. This should not be a big change for Pennsylvania TSPs because this is already what we are doing for forest management plans in the past and forest stand analysis in the previous CAP 106 plan. And there are specific details in the templates as well. The sampling intensity for the plan must meet the minimum plot density in this National Forestry Tech Note. This is the minimum intensity, but if you're using programs like Silva, it might require greater minimum sampling intensity. And also note that this tech note does not specifically call out minimum sampling requirements for regeneration plots or interference plots. All right. If everybody could please make sure that they're muted, that would be very helpful. Okay, the resource concerns. Within the stand inventory, there does need to be an identification of which resource concerns exist on the stand. So the checklist and the template links to the NRCS resource concerns planning criteria found in the Field Office Technical Guide. On forest lands, for conservation planning, NRCS is usually dealing with plant condition-related resource concerns, but it is not uncommon for there to be other resource concerns identified on forest lands that might relate to wildlife habitat or soil erosion or water quality. This is where the resource concerns list lives in the field office technical guide under section 3, subfolder called National Resource Concern List and Planning Criteria. And there's that resource concern list document, which looks like this. I should note that the Pennsylvania Resource Conservationist is also working to make kind of a simplified checklist of resource concerns that could be referred to for planning documents like the Forest Management Plan. Once that is approved, we'll load that into the same field office technical guide folder in section 3 where this document lives and make everybody informed of that document. So the desired future conditions, this is based on individual stand level. So for each stand, the Forest Management Plan will need to have a desired future condition section and evaluation of the stand. This is based on a 10-year lifespan of the Forest Management Plan. And these are the minimum components that need to be addressed in the desired future conditions section. And you can add more components as necessary to accurately portray the desired future conditions. I want to highlight the forest management activities. This should describe the landowner's selected regeneration techniques or silvicultural systems or harvesting systems and any future monitoring that will be used to achieve the desired future conditions of the stand. And then these activities that are included in the forest management activities section should be reflected in the practice schedule. You're going to want to utilize NRCS conservation practice codes and names, and then prescription information for those practices for the management activities will be discussed later in the actual design and implementation details section. Also, in this section, you need to discuss a conservation alternative. So there has to be a minimum of one conservation alternative to meet the resource needs or the participants' objectives. And not or. So alternatives for achieving the desired future conditions document the effect of each alternative on resource concerns. So a conservation alternative might be a different method of achieving the desired future condition that's not the landowner's preferred alternative. The preferred alternative is the alternative that gets placed in the actual practice schedule. So that could be something as simple as, if their preferred alternative is to use herbicides to treat invasive species, a conservation alternative could be to use mechanical treatment to treat invasive species. And then there also needs to be a no-action alternative. So projects have to have this no-action alternative comparing the current benchmark conditions to the projected conditions 10 years into the future if no forest management activities take place over the next 10 years. So that could be simply the degradation of the conditions, the exacerbation of invasive species on the site, impacts such as that. All right, for the design and implementation details section of the Forest Management Plan, there needs to include the prescription and necessary specifications to actually implement the practices for each practice scheduled. So for this, we are encouraging you to use the implementation requirements documents found in section 4 of the Field Office Technical Guide, but they are not required to be used. If you do use the implementation requirements, you must complete them with the necessary prescription and specifications and include them as an appendix. So all the implementation requirements are filed in section 4 of the Field Office Tech Guide. And the file names for each of these follow this naming convention that you see on the screen here. So the practice name, the state, IR for implementation requirements, and then the practice name, and then the year that it was developed. So practices are in alphabetical order. You click on these conservation practice standards and support documents, and then you get a full list of all the different practices. There's 160 some practices the NRCS supports. Scroll down alphabetically and then find the implementation requirements. This is an example, first page of what the implementation requirements looks like for brush management, which is a pretty commonly utilized practice on forest lands in Pennsylvania. I included this because this practice on the third page includes a specific list of species that have been approved by the NRCS National Office that Pennsylvania requested for multiple treatments, up to 3 on the same footprint using brush management. So this is important to know, and I think I've relayed this to many folks before, but those species that are included in the list, those are persistent species that require multiple treatments. And that's something that NRCS has adjusted for in the past few years to pay for financial assistance to support multiple treatments, both under this practice, brush management, and also under herbaceous weed treatment. So that is something that you might want to think about when you're incorporating into your practice schedule in the forest management plan. The next section is the property resource inventory section, and there are several different categories that need to be described at the property level. This section has not really changed from the older CAP 106 criteria. In the Pennsylvania FMP template, we describe each of these items in detail and what type of information should be described for each topic. I do want to point out that this section does include the description of protected species, and that is accomplished in Pennsylvania through the PNDI, the Natural Diversity Index by the TSP, getting a report through Conservation Explorer system. So the PNDI report results should be included in the description here, and then also the PNDI receipt should be included in the appendix. Next is the practice schedule. In the template, there is a sample practice schedule that you're seeing on your screen here. This is a table that can be added to with more rows as necessary for planning. This includes information like the track number, the stand number, the practice code, and the practice name. We're also including a very brief practice description box, the estimated amount and units of the practice to be implemented, and the dates, the month and year of the conservation activities that are intended to be installed. So this practice schedule should be used and actually must be used in conjunction with a conservation plan map to document the participant's decision. That's that conservation practice base map that we discussed earlier. And that brief description of the planned conservation practices is there to provide a little clarification on what practice scenario is going to be selected. So, for example, you could say something like forest stand improvement is the practice name. And then in the practice description, you could say that you're going to treat species composition, stand structure, or density by cutting and killing selected trees or understory vegetation to achieve desired forest conditions. All right, and then the forest management plan appendix. This should include copies of the PNDI, like I mentioned, which has been run for the forest management planning category. Copies of the implementation requirements, the forest stand analysis report, like your Silva report or something, or a different format if you're using a different format, and then applicable reference material that actually will support the landowner in implementing the planned conservation practices. This reference material should be usable and helpful for the landowner, but it shouldn't be every single document that you've ever printed off from Penn State Extension. It should be usable for the landowner. All right, I'm going to shift gears a bit and focus on a few other updates. In the forestry discipline, we made a few updates this past year. We've released the windbreak shelter belt establishment and renovation practice to the field office tech guide. This was a combination of two practices. There used to be a renovation practice all by itself. I think it was $650. That practice has been retired and combined together in with this practice 380 that you're seeing on the screen. We do have quite a few standards up for review in fiscal year 2023, which includes tree and shrub pruning, forest farming, forest stand improvement, fuel break, and fire break. I also want to mention that we are looking to support an alternative method for protecting regeneration around silvicultural treatment areas. Under woody residue treatment 384, there is a scenario called forest/heavy that can be utilized for the creation of slash walls. Now, slash walls are something that Cornell has been working with on the Arnall forest, and they've calculated that slash walls should be able to be constructed at about $2 per linear foot. So with this 384 woody residue treatment slash wall, you're obviously going to need to do that in conjunction with a treatment that is opening up the overstory, creating some slash on the ground, like forest stand improvement or early successional habitat. In comparison to what is typically done on the tree shrub regeneration area with protection under 612, essentially a deer fence, slash wall pays quite a bit less. For example, a 20-acre regeneration area protection fencing would receive an EQIP incentive payment of about $22,000. Slash wall would receive an EQIP payment of about $8,000 for a 20 square acre linear wall surrounding an area. But we are also seeing that some contractor estimates are coming in much higher for those deer fences, and we have seen quite a few modifications on contracts and cancellations on contracts. So we're putting this out there as an alternative. Cornell has seen some really good success with these in their research, and they are working on putting out some guidance documents, standard operating procedures for slash walls. This is kind of what the outside of a slash wall looks like at Cornell's Arnall research forest. And the specs on this are constructed up to about 10 feet tall and about 20 feet wide on the base. Like I mentioned, Cornell is going to be releasing a practice guide on these soon, and I will make sure that you are all on the receiving end of that once it comes out. Again, this is something that we're trying to support as simply an alternative to metal fencing, but we recognize that this has to start with it being included in forest management plans and supported by consultants and contractors like yourselves. This is looking from the outside of the slash wall. Visited one in December up there. And this is looking on the inside of a slash wall that was just constructed recently in this past year, I believe. Okay, lastly, I'm going to cover some brief updates before we get to questions on the TSP registry system. Dan Ludwig was not able to make it today, but I'm going to do my best to cover this portion of it. for TSP registry updates. Many of you know Dan Ludwig is our state resource conservationist, but also the state TSP coordinator. So specific questions about registry system likely need to still go through Dan. But if there are questions that I can try to address today on this, I'm happy to do that. So a lot of you, probably most of you, received an email from the National TSP Coordinator explaining this change in November, I believe. So new in fiscal year 2023, the DIA criteria requires a TSP to be certified for all the practices that they're planning, not just for the DIA 165. So to account for that change, the Pennsylvania checklist, in that Pennsylvania checklist, we've added this section to check off on TSP certification status for the practices that the TSP is including in the plan, not just for the 106 and the 165. I see a typo right there, sorry, but also for every single practice that they're including in the plan. You have to be registered in the TSP registry system. I do know so far that there's only been a few folks who have gone in to the registry system and added practices to their registry profiles so far. So I would like to encourage you all to go in and do this because we need to confirm this registration status now. And I recognize that this is an additional step that was not necessary before, but at the state level, we really don't have any control over this decision that was made at the national level. So this is a growing pain that the TSPs and states are having to work through for this year. So, we will be encouraging folks to do that. And another big change that the TSP program manager at the national level has rolled out is the practice and conservation activity list and certification criteria. This is a huge document that includes all the CPAs and DIAs, as well as all the conservation practices, including the qualifications, experience, education, training, and renewal criteria for each of those practices and activities. This was released to give all the necessary information to interested TSPs and renewing TSPs in one place instead of how it previously worked in trying to navigate through several different documents depending on the type of activity or a practice or otherwise. This is kind of difficult to show, but this is kind of what the criteria looks like, and you can see that it shows all the qualifications, experience, education, training, and renewal criteria for each individual practice. I have gone through this for all the forestry ones. I've noticed a few omissions. So if you look at the 106 criteria right now, it is missing the education and experience section. So there's some issues in there, but in general, this is what they're trying to do, is get all the information out there. So this can help you if you're having any questions or issues before you get to the registry system on what requirements or education or training requirements are necessary for certain practices or for renewing your TSP registration profiles. All right, so that is the end of my presentation, and here is my contact information. I've also included Dan Ludwig's contact information. Again, he is the state TSP coordinator and the state resource conservationist. And I've been seeing some questions coming into the chat, so I'm going to back up and see if I can try and address some of those questions. So Mark said, and a plan for 100 acres gets the same incentive payment as a plan for 20 acres. Well, I can back up to a slide there for you, Mark, and show the incentive payments. Sorry, this is going to be nauseating for folks like me. But yes, this has always been the breakout. 21 acres through 100 acres is the breakout. And then these are the breakouts: 101 acres to 250 acres, 251 to 500, 501 to 1,000. That's correct. Scrolling down, and Clyde asks, must we use the Boxy template or fill it in? Excuse me. Must we use the Boxy template and fill it in, or can we use our own format with the same info in same order? You do not have to use my Boxy template. You can use your own template. We were putting that information out there as simply as information. We had several requests for a template from technical service providers. It was my understanding last year that National was working on a template. That still has not happened. I'm not sure if that's going to come or not. So Pennsylvania worked on our own template. If you're asking about the checklist, that is very boxy. I'll give you that, and you can follow the format in the checklist that's available for information to help you out. Mark asks, please speak to stand analysis requirements for CPA and DIA, and is the stand analysis requirement specific to Pennsylvania or nationwide? Well, if I go forward a little bit here, this is this information, the diameter distribution by species and 2-inch size class, site indices, percent stocking. This is all nationwide. And this forestry tech note on minimum number of plots for inventory and stands various sizes, this is nationwide. This is not Pennsylvania specific. What often happens with Pennsylvania plans is the TSPs or plan writers are utilizing Silva. Silva is really a regional and more of a Pennsylvania specific program. That is not required, but if you're utilizing that, it does need to meet these minimum requirements. Silva does have some more stringent requirements on plot density. So that is a Pennsylvania specific program usually that is not required to be utilized, but you do need to meet the minimum requirements in the stand resource inventory and assessment section, which includes that diameter distribution by species in 2-inch size classes. I hope that answers your question. Clyde asks, are the desired future conditions those desired by the landowner? Yes. I could take that a couple of different ways, but yes, I think the easiest way to answer that is that the desired future conditions are those desired by the landowner, and that would be their preferred alternative. And does the CPA 52 meet the requirements of the alternative descriptions? NRCS is required to include alternatives within the CPA 52. TSPs are not required to fill out the CPA 52. So the NRCS folks will be utilizing, to every extent possible, the alternatives that are developed in the forest management plan to populate the CPA 52. If those who are not familiar with the CPA 52, that is the environmental assessment, environmental evaluation document that is completed to satisfy the National Environmental Policy Act requirements for every project that is being implemented. John asks, does a forest stewardship plan need to include a DIA 165? I believe I'm going to have to get back to you on that, John. I am not, essentially the DIA 165 is the design and prescription information for each individual practice. I am not an expert on the forest stewardship plan, and that is a question that we might have to run by the forest stewardship program. Clyde asks, how do you handle slash wall payment when the slash wall is not sufficient to allow the linear feet contracted? Clyde, I think I'm going to ask for some clarification on that. The payment is in excess of what Cornell is estimating it would cost to construct a slash wall. What I showed on the screen there. So if you're comparing it to the regeneration area protection fencing, the metal fencing, it is much less than that, but the payment for slash wall construction under 384 that I showed on the screen there that I can scroll to now is higher than what Cornell estimated they were getting their payment or getting their slash walls constructed for. So this payment, $373.59 per acre, if you break it out down to using this example, it comes out to about $2.13 per linear foot. Cornell was estimating about $2 per linear foot in their research. All right, Clyde asks, or maybe gives us an FYI. He says, FYI, although I've been a TSP for more than 10 years, I'm required to complete 8 or 10 additional training courses to recertify for CAP 106. And also notes several Pennsylvania Field Office Technical Guide, the National Natural Resource Inventory and Historical Registry don't work. And also says, I don't use ArcMap, which is what the canopy cover is geared towards. Will there be alternative GIS instructions? Noted. I'm not sure about this Natural Resource Inventory and Historical Registry. I will check with our archaeologist on that one. If you don't use ArcMap, that's fine. Nothing in this said that it had to be done through ArcMap. The canopy cover GIS instructions that you are looking at, probably in the Field Office Technical Guide, that is predominantly for determining if the land is forest or not, which has to have 25% or greater canopy cover. That does not have to be done through GIS. That can be done in the field, estimating canopy cover. And Clyde also asked, do we need to complete the NEPA CPA 52 for each practice or stand, or is it just for one property? You do not need to complete the CPA 52 at all. That is responsibility of the NRCS field staff, but that is done at the property level. All right, Mike Eckley asks, can Con 6 notes be expanded to include inputs from NRCS and Bureau of Forestry staff? In some instances, I have no idea of the communication between landowner and NRCS staff. It's become a problem that could be addressed through requiring Con 6 notes to be updated by NRCS and shared out to TSPs contracted for FMPs and projects. The NRCS staff are collecting conservation assistance notes on their own, or should be. As far as sharing that information, there should be a release of records form completed for the TSPs. So the information should be able to be shared, but I do encourage folks to CC the field office staff on email communication with the TSPs and the landowners. That way, folks can get on the same page. And also please note that there is that requirement for the pre-planning meeting. We would like everybody to get on the same page. That's not just a Pennsylvania requirement, that is a national requirement to have that pre-planning meeting. All right, getting almost caught up on questions here. So Mark asks, so stewardship plan / tree farm plans / other forest management plans prior to 2021 need to utilize the new SEMA. Are they then eligible for implementation requirements? No, they do not need to utilize the new SEMA. A lot of stewardship plans and forest management plans prior to 2021 were still including inventory. If it was a plan that did not include any inventory, that's something that we could look at on a case-by-case basis to contract the SEMA 223 to make them eligible for implementation contracts. Rob asks, just to confirm, the CPA 52 is not part of the plan complete limits requirement. That's correct. The CPA 52 is something completed by NRCS field staff, not by the TSP. But the information collected in the forest management plan is helpful to the field staff completing the CPA 52. Mike asks, in addressing all of these change and from a communication and quality control standpoint, can you describe any NRCS systems that you have in place to enable feedback loops for TSPs? I'm an open door. Feedback loops, I have my email communication there. You guys are always willing to reach, or always able to reach out to me. At the national level, some of these changes are done by the national forester. I have feedback loops with the national forester rarely. So I can express my concerns about some of the changes that have been implemented, but to ensure that the state is meeting the national requirements, I am more than willing to hear out some concerns with forums like this. Please reach out to me. My contact information, I will put that back up on the screen. Rick asks, must slash walls be a minimum of 20 feet at the base and 10 feet tall? The minimum height is 10 feet. Excuse me. I believe Cornell said that on average, to get to that 10 feet tall, the minimum, what they are seeing at the base is usually about 20 feet at the base. Taylor says, to improve a stewardship plan, etc., if the SEMA is required, is it required for all stands, even if overstory manipulation is not planned, or just the stands that have overstory manipulation planned? Usually, I'm going to have to get back to you on that one, Taylor. Usually, forest management planning efforts are done property-wide. I'll have to take a close look at how the SEMA is written. Again, we probably won't be contracting many of those, but we need to get on the same page on that one for sure. John says, I don't see a problem with that for the Bureau side of things. I'm not sure which comment you're referring to, John, but thank you. Taylor says, are plans written to meet the stewardship plan guideline requirements that weren't written as part of the stewardship plan program accepted as stewardship plans? To digest that question, are plans written to meet the, that should be checked by the service foresters. Stewardship plan guideline requirements are kind of in the hands of the service foresters. I'd refer you to John on that one. John mentions my above comments are in regards to Bureau providing Con 6 forms. Sorry if it was no problem, John. And then Clyde says, for renewal of certification training, what is the state-specific conservation course? Clyde, I believe that there is something in the works. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one too. That is a question that needs to run by Dan Ludwig. TSP certification, John. I do see one hand up. I want to make sure we get to that before the time's up. I believe that's Rob Piper. Rob, did you want to unmute and ask your question?
No, I'm good.
It must be really good. Okay. I hope this was helpful to. Okay, Paul Knoll also has his hand up. Sorry, I didn't see that. Paul, do you have a question? Paul, do you want to unmute and ask your question? All right, I'm not hearing Paul, but Mark has a clarification question. So the entire forested property requires some sort of stand analysis, even if there's no overstory manipulation within the 10-year plan period. That is correct. The forest management plan requires stand analysis, some sort of stand analysis. It's not dependent on treatment. It's a summary of the conditions of the stand, the inventory of the stand. All right, I see a hand up. Paul, do you want to go off mute and ask your question? All right, Paul, if you can't figure out how to go off mute, that's fine. You can always send me an email, ask your question, or give me a call. And I do want to take this time to thank everybody for joining this meeting. I hope this was helpful to folks, helpful to try and answer some questions. And I will be getting the recording out to everybody as soon as we can. Last year we posted it as a YouTube video, and also send out the slides that include the embedded links. So at this point, I'm going to stop the recording. We're just over time, and